A lot to digest coming out of week one. Let's talk about some sneaky ads. Number one, Brandin Cooks of the Dallas Cowboys. He's about 30% rostered right now in ESPN leagues. 7 targets, 4 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown for Cooks in week one against a good Cleveland Browns defense. That game on the road in Cleveland. Keep in mind, Jake Ferguson likely to miss some time. He appears to have dodged a serious injury, but still week to week, dealing with a bone bruise, dealing with an MCL sprain. You're taking away a big-time target in that Cowboys offense, which is already pretty narrow. It's getting even more narrow right now, and Brandin Cooks easily now the number 2 option in that offense behind CeeDee Lamb. Now, the Cowboys get the Saints and the Ravens the next 2 weeks, so not necessarily plus matchups, but we'll see how that New Orleans defense looks against a real team that's not the Carolina Panthers. And look, if you're in need of receiver help, you could do a lot worse than the number 2 guy in a Cowboys offense that moved the ball pretty effortlessly on a good Browns defense in week one. Next on the list, not a player I necessarily thought we'd be talking about after week one, but Alexander Mattison of the Las Vegas Raiders. 1 week into the year, we're already concerned about Zamir White. The writing was on the wall in the preseason. White struggled early against the Chargers in week one. Those first 6 carries of the game went for 6 yards, just no explosion whatsoever. Lost a big fumble in the second half, never really got on track as the game went along. And while Zamir White out-carried Alexander Mattison 13-5 in week one, it was Mattison who saw 6 targets to just 2 for Zamir White, and Mattison was on the field for 36 snaps compared to just 23 for Zamir White. Zamir White was still the early down guy deep into the game, but Mattison saw every third down snap. He was on the field in the 2-minute drill and the obvious passing situations. Honestly, I'm not thrilled with either of these guys in this offense, but with the Raiders likely to be trailing next week against the Ravens, being some passing situations in the second half, I think I'd rather have Alexander Mattison in the short term. We have a couple wide receivers to keep an eye on for the LA Rams, and both are almost certainly available in your fantasy leagues. Tyler Johnson and Demarcus Robinson. Now, it was Johnson who had the big play in the fourth quarter to put the Rams ahead in week one against Detroit, finished with 5 catches for 79 yards on 7 targets. If Puka Nacua misses time, which to me seems very likely, I think this could be a multi-week injury for Nacua, it's probably Johnson who moves into that quote-unquote Nacua role in this offense. Now, is he going to do it at the level of Nacua? No, absolutely not. But it's still a massive boost for short-term value, especially with the Rams' offensive line likely to be a major issue going forward. They have injuries, they have suspensions. Steve Avila went out on Sunday night. This is going to be a pass-heavy team if they want to hang in. Now, Robinson also had 7 targets, caught 4 of those for 42 yards. He did out-snap Johnson 72-51, ran 8 more routes on those snaps. Johnson, to me, he's an interesting piece in a new system. Robinson, he has the cachet already with McVay and Stafford. And remember, Robinson closed last season averaging 7 targets and 64 yards per game over his final 5 regular season games. That was with both Kupp and Nacua healthy and playing a ton of snaps. So ultimately, here's what it comes down to. If you're looking for upside, I think Johnson is the play. If you're looking for a higher floor week to week, a guy who's already heavily involved in week one, go for Demarcus Robinson. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a like. Please consider subscribing to the RotoWire YouTube channel for more fantasy football content all season long. All right, let's get back to our sneaky ads. All right, we'll run through a few more quickly here. Wan'Dale Robinson of the New York Giants. I know everybody's trying to get a piece of the Giants offense, so good luck. You're going to have to bid him up. He was targeted 12 times by Daniel Jones in a pass-heavy script in week one, caught 6 of those for 44 yards. Still third on the team in snaps behind Malik Nabers and Darius Slayton. And, you know, we could quibble about the quality of those targets from Daniel Jones and what that will look like going forward. But we like to see the volume from Wan'Dale Robinson. We can't ignore that. Giants are likely to find themselves in plenty of come-from-behind, pass-heavy scripts the rest of the way. So, you know, Robinson isn't someone I'm looking to start by any means anytime soon. If you're doing that, you're in trouble. But if you're looking for a depth piece or an option in deeper leagues, there's some intrigue here in what's otherwise a pretty depressing offense outside of Nabers. Let's talk some Indianapolis Colts. Josh Downs specifically is interesting to me. Now, Josh Downs was out for week one, but could be back on the field week 2 against the Green Bay Packers. And, you know, you're probably saying, Nick, Alec Pierce, he's the obvious name for the Colts. Had a huge week one, and he did. I get that. But he was targeted only 3 times. And Anthony Richardson only completed 9 passes on the day. I guess when those 3 catches go for 125 yards and a touchdown, that's great. But we can't depend on that on a weekly basis on limited volume. Obviously, Michael Pittman, he's going to lead Indy in targets most weeks. A.D. Mitchell, the rookie, he drew 5 targets of his own, was overthrown a few times. Could have had a huge day if Anthony Richardson was a little bit more on target. Pierce is going to continue to be feast or famine in my mind. I think Downs could slide back in as that number 2 receiver behind Michael Pittman once he's healthy. And again, there's hope that Josh Downs could be back as soon as this week for Green Bay, which if he is, I think that's actually a really good spot for him to debut. I think the Packers are going to struggle to move the ball with Malik Willis at quarterback. Green Bay gave up 278 passing yards, some big plays to Jalen Hurts and the Eagles last week. So you're probably not starting Josh Downs if he's back this week, but if I'm making a spec ad on a Colts wide receiver, Downs is the guy to me with the best combination of floor and upside in the long term. A few running backs we're keeping an eye on this week. Jaleel McLaughlin in Denver, 44% rostered. So maybe he's available, maybe he's not in your league. Now, Javonte Williams won the snaps battle, but McLaughlin had more carries and more targets than Javonte in week 1 against Seattle. He had 5 catches that went for 1 yard. The efficiency on those targets could be an issue going forward with Bo Nix at quarterback, but obviously we love the volume here for McLaughlin. Now, Denver does get a tough matchup next week against the Steelers defense, but McLaughlin makes sense to me in a PPR league if you're looking for some running back depth. When it comes to Bucky Irving, I want to be careful here because 6 of his 9 carries in week 1 came in the second half when the Bucs were already up by multiple touchdowns on the Commanders. So we need to keep some context in mind here. And we did see Rachaad White, mixing in late in the game, even when it was out of hand. But either way, Bucky Irving looked more explosive. 62 yards on those 9 carries, 6.9 yards per carry to just 2.1 for Rachaad White. But White, of course, still gave you 6 catches for 75 yards. That's why we love him in PPR leagues. Tampa Bay, they play at Detroit next week. Much more difficult matchup. We'll see how the workload breaks down. But if you're looking for a back with some upside to add right now, go grab Bucky Irving. If you wait another week, it might be a little bit too late. When it comes to Tank Bigsby in Jacksonville, I'm pumping the brakes a little bit here. We have to consider Bigsby was a complete bust last season. He had fumbles, he had drops that landed him in the doghouse. Now, all the reports this summer is that he's turned it around. He had a great year. He's going to be a bigger factor, and we saw that in week 1 against Miami. He played only 17 snaps in week 1 compared to 37 for ETN, but Bigsby carried the ball on 12 of those 17 snaps in a competitive game throughout, which was a lot more efficient than Travis Etienne. Even with the devastating fumble that cost Jacksonville the game for Etienne, I don't think his job is in any real danger here, but I do think the Jags do want to cut back on his workload overall. Etienne was routinely playing 80, 85+% of the snaps throughout much of last season. That just won't be the case as long as Tank Bigsby is a viable alternative. To me, Bigsby is more of a handcuff at this stage for fantasy purposes. I don't see this being a true timeshare where they're splitting it 50-50 or 60-40. I think ETN is the guy until proven otherwise, but we're seeing more Tank Bigsby early on than we were last season, and he's someone certainly worth adding in deeper leagues. All right, those are some players to consider grabbing on the waiver wire this week. Go check out all of our content over at RotoWire.com. If you're not a subscriber, you want full access, here's what you do. Just go to RotoWire.com/try, T-R-Y. That'll get you a free look behind the paywall. No credit card required. No obligation to cancel. RotoWire.com/try.